They used to laugh at him. Every time he pulled out his homemade products from the back of his car or posted another limited drop on social media, they'd roll their eyes. It's just a phase, they said. He'll give up once he realizes no one's buying that stuff. But he wasn't just trying to make some extra money. He was building something they couldn't see yet. What started as a side hustle from his small apartment, with barely enough savings to buy materials, slowly began to gain traction. He'd work long hours at his 9 to 5, then stay up past midnight fulfilling orders, answering DMs, and shipping out packages. While others spent their weekends partying or resting, he was sketching new designs, learning how to market online, and reading about how to scale a business. No fancy office, no investors, just belief, grit, and a dream too stubborn to die. People from his own circle doubted him. Friends stopped checking in. Even some family members suggested he focus on something more stable. But what they didn't realize is that the very thing they mocked was quietly transforming his life. And just a few years later, the same people who laughed are now clocking into jobs, working for him. So how did he turn a side hustle into a full-blown company? How did he go from being underestimated to being the boss? That part of the story is where things really get interesting. He never planned on being an entrepreneur. In fact, for most of his life, he thought success meant getting promoted at his regular job, keeping his head down, and playing it safe. But everything changed the day he realized he was building someone else's dream instead of his own. The idea for his side hustle came from a simple frustration. He couldn't find a product that fit his needs, so he decided to make it himself. What started as a one-off project quickly sparked interest when he posted about it online. A few likes turned into comments. Comments turned into orders, and that's when something clicked. Still, it wasn't easy. He was juggling a full-time job, barely making ends meet, and using whatever was left from each paycheck to buy supplies. His workspace was a cluttered corner of his kitchen. There were nights when he questioned everything, especially when orders didn't come in or when people online mocked the quality of his early work. Who's actually buying this? One comment read. Others weren't so polite. But instead of quitting, he let those comments fuel him. He upgraded his materials. He studied branding and customer experience. He learned how to ship faster, market smarter, and serve better. Still, the pressure kept building. Bills were piling up. He had no safety net. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get more stressful, something happened. A sudden twist that would either make or break everything he had worked for. The twist came in the form of a massive order, his first big break. A popular influencer shared one of his products in a story, and overnight, his inbox exploded. Hundreds of messages, dozens of orders. It was everything he had dreamed of, but it also pushed him to the edge. He didn't have enough stock, packaging, or even time to keep up. What was supposed to be a moment of victory quickly turned into a crisis. Customers were waiting, some growing impatient. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. And all the while, he was still showing up to work every morning, pretending like nothing had changed. He tried to bring in help, friends, a cousin or two, but most didn't take it seriously. They'd show up late, mess up orders, or quit after a day. He couldn't afford real employees yet, but he also couldn't keep doing it alone. On top of that, his job was starting to notice his late arrivals and distracted attitude. His manager pulled him aside and asked, "Is your little side business becoming a problem here?" That hit hard. He had always prided himself on being dependable. Now he was stuck between risking everything he had built or losing the only stable income he had left. To make matters worse, competitors had started popping up, some copying his designs, others undercutting his prices. It felt like the more he grew, the more pressure piled on, and deep down, he knew a decision was coming, one that would change everything. He stood at a crossroads, barely sleeping, constantly moving. Every day felt like a race against time, fulfilling backlogged orders, answering customer questions, dodging negative reviews, and trying to save face at his day job. The stress was getting to him. His health started slipping. He was missing meals, losing weight, forgetting appointments. And still, he couldn't stop. The hustle had become his entire life. But things were about to get even more complicated. One evening, after a long shift and hours of packaging in his living room, he got an email that made his heart sink. It was from a lawyer representing a major brand, accusing him of copying a design that, honestly, he hadn't even known existed. It wasn't true, but the threat was real. Legal pressure, possible shutdown. Just when he thought he was breaking through, now he was staring at a wall that could end everything. On top of that, his job had issued a final warning. One more late arrival, one more missed task, and he'd be out. Fired, no income, no safety net. And then came the message that shook him even harder. A massive retailer wanted to meet. They had seen his products online and were interested in discussing a partnership. It should have felt like the big break. But the meeting? It was on the same day as his final chance to save his job. With everything on the line, his dream, his job, and his future, he had a choice to make, and the clock was ticking. The night before the big day, he barely slept. His mind was spinning with questions. If he skipped work to attend the meeting, he'd most likely get fired. If he skipped the meeting, he might miss the only chance to take his side hustle full-time. Either way, there was no guarantee things would work out. His anxiety was through the roof. He paced the room, surrounded by stacks of packaging materials, his laptop glowing with unread messages and unprocessed orders. Every path forward seemed risky, but doing nothing, that would mean staying stuck forever. Morning came fast. He ironed his one good shirt, packed a sample of his best-selling product into a clean box, and took a deep breath. Traffic was brutal. Every red light felt like a test. His hands were shaking. He kept checking the time. He was going to be late to the meeting, or late to work. He couldn't be on time to both. And right in that moment, he realized something. The safety he'd been holding onto wasn't really safe at all. He'd been giving so much of himself to a job that would replace him in a week, while the business he built from nothing was waiting for him to take the next step. As he stood outside the building where the meeting would take place, his phone started ringing. It was his manager. Again, one more call he couldn't ignore. But just as he was about to answer, the doors to the building opened. He stared at the open doors for a moment, heart pounding. The manager's call kept buzzing in his hand, but this time he let it ring. He walked into the building, greeted by a receptionist who already knew his name. "They're expecting you," she smiled. The meeting room was sleek, intimidating, filled with sharp suits and serious expressions. But once he began laying out his product, his story, his process, something shifted. The energy in the room changed. They weren't just impressed by what he had made. They were moved by how he had built it, by hand, from nothing, while working full-time. The lead rep leaned forward. "We think your brand has real potential," he said. "We'd like to talk about scaling fast." It was everything he hoped for. A chance to grow. A chance to finally bet on himself. But just as the meeting ended, his phone lit up again. This time, a text from his now former manager. "Asterisk, don't bother coming in. We're letting you go, asterisk." For a second, he panicked. No job, no steady paycheck. But then he looked around. The meeting wasn't just a win, it was validation. What came next wasn't going to be easy, but it was finally his. On the way out, he got another message. From one of the people who used to mock his hustle. It simply read, asterisk, "Hey, man. I saw your stuff everywhere now. Are you hiring, asterisk?" He smiled, paused for a moment, and replied, asterisk, "Let's talk, asterisk." Things didn't magically get easier after that message. There were still long nights, unexpected setbacks, and tough decisions. But this time he was building on his own terms. With the new partnership, he was finally able to move production out of his cramped apartment and into a small warehouse. He hired a few people, some he trusted from the start, and yes, even a couple of the ones who once laughed at him. Not out of spite, but because he knew what it felt like to be doubted, and he believed in second chances. Over time, his brand became a name people recognized. What once looked like a little side hustle was now a growing business with real impact. He gave talks at local schools, sharing how he got started. He helped others launch their own ideas, and every time he walked past the building where he used to clock in, he felt a quiet kind of pride, not because he had proved anyone wrong, but because he'd finally proven something to himself. Looking back, he realized the journey wasn't about the money or the success. It was about believing in an idea when no one else did, about choosing growth over comfort, and showing up day after day when it would have been easier to quit. What started as a side hustle turned into a life he once thought was out of reach. And the best part? He was just getting started.